Death is not my friend, but nor is it my enemy. It is my destiny. Now, that was said by someone who's a bit of a hero of mine, my favourite undertaker. No offence to the other undertakers I know. A guy called Rue Callender, who runs the Green Funeral Company down in the southwest. And he's done a lot of work and has an approach to death and funerals that I find fascinating and refreshing. And it seems appropriate because we're doing a season over the next couple of months around death and glory. And we've deliberately named it the two because death on its own seems a bit empty. And glory on its own seems a bit shallow, doesn't it? So we're looking over the next 2 months around all the different aspects that we can of death. Now, death is something that our culture, although on the surface it looks like we talk about it, we actually don't. Because when we talk about death, we're often talking about kind of fictionalized stuff. So death is popular in films and TV shows and comics and cartoons. There's all kinds of death, isn't there? Complicated murders and weird ways of dying and horror films. You think we are in a death cult in some respects, but none of it is real. It's all cartoon deaths, isn't it? It's all complicated stuff. And very little of it is actually reality. Because death in reality is, and don't misunderstand me, in reality death is quite mundane. We die in a hospital bed, or maybe at home, sometimes in an accident, but rarely how we do in films with soft lighting and powerful music and heroic looks into the distance. That's not how death works. That's not the death that we talk about. So in a society that's very frothy and into instant images, the reality of death gets kind of shoved to one side because it's inconvenient and it's a bit normal. But death raises questions, doesn't it, for us? All kinds of questions, and it raises emotions within us, particularly if we've lost someone that we love. It triggers all kinds of responses within, and we can't do anything about it. We can try and manage it, we can keep a lid on it, we can push it down, push it away, we can run, but it catches us. The questions. Why? Why did it happen? Why does it hurt? Why do I fear it? What is it that I fear? Is it for me? Is it for others? All these questions that come up. So over the next 2 months, as we look at this subject, it doesn't matter what you believe, whether you have a faith system or not, whether you think when you're dead, you're gone, that's it. Because if you are dead and gone and that's it, well, there's lots of people left behind. You might think, well, that doesn't matter, I'll be gone. But for many of us, almost the afterlife is one question, but what we leave behind is another one. So talking about death and how we manage it, how we deal with it, how we address our own response to it is an important question for all human beings, whatever we believe or wherever we're from, because it's one of the great levelers. All human beings will die. All human beings will encounter death. And that's what makes things so fascinating for us as human beings, and what shows us all to be the same underneath it all. So this season's going to look at 3 areas, and you don't have to come to everything. There's a whole range of stuff, and the idea really is that you dip in and out of things that you find intriguing or fascinating or interesting, or you just like to have a look at. One of the streams within the series is around the practicalities of it, and I use that word quite loosely. The practicalities around, well, what does the law say? What about wills and inheritances? What about funeral homes? What do they actually do with the bodies behind those doors in those beige carpeted buildings? We're going to have a talk from someone from a hospice. You know, how does that work? How does it get paid for? Who can use it? How do you get in? So they're very practical questions that some of us face. There's another stream within that flows its way through the different events, and that's about me and my response to grief. How do I handle grief? What do I do with it? What questions do I have around life now? What questions do I have about what it's all about? So there's some time, some opportunities to share our own thoughts and our fears and perhaps our hopes. And the third stream is more, I guess, philosophical. And we'll be looking at issues around afterlife, if there is one or not. We'll be looking at issues of faith and how that ties in. So in that particular stream, we'll be doing a study. There's someone doing a talk on the biblical understanding of the afterlife, right from the Old Testament days through to the book of Revelation. So death starts in the Bible, basically in a cave under the ground. But it ends with this golden heavenly city descending. So there's a development in thought. We'll be looking at that. We'll be discussing heaven and hell and who goes where and why and how does that work. And we'll be discussing all kinds of things around that. So one of the nights we've got is talking about ghosts. If you're of a faith, particularly Christian faith, you'll be thinking, well, ghosts, that doesn't fit. Well, perhaps it does. And we've also got someone coming in to talk about near-death experiences and his theories on what are they. So we're trying to make it that kind of intriguing questions that we all have. Sometimes you just write it off, don't you? And sometimes in the middle of the night when you wake up, you think, well, what if? What is that about? So there's a chance to explore that without looking too strange. Well, most of us, some of you. So these next 2 months, we're looking at death square in the eye socket and saying, well, what's that all about? What's going on here? Why do funeral directors wear big hats? How do I manage if I'm ill? What about what I leave behind? Is there anything else? We'll talk, we'll explore, hopefully we'll have a good time as well. So join in. What I'm going to do now, I'm going to run you through, we've had a couple of events, I'm going to run you through the events that are coming up over the next few weeks. And look on the Facebook page, Death and Glory, the @ address is not Our Bones. But there'll be a QR code at the end of this film that tells you, that can take you there. Or just you'll find us. Find us via the church website if you want, cwbc.church. So here's what's coming up. So sit back, grab a drink. Hopefully it's only about 5 minutes. I got stuff to do, I've got a life to live. And let's see what's coming up over the next couple of months. Well, thank me. Well, coming up first, we've got John Froud doing a concert this Saturday, 9th of September. Should be good. Oh, can we have some music? Can we? Yeah, that's better. Then next Tuesday, it's a trip to look around a funeral home. This is rapid fire, this is. And on that evening, we've also got some solicitors coming in who are going to talk about some of the legal implications of when we die. The following week, 21st, a discussion and a debate over heaven and hell. What's that all about? What's going on? What do people think? Followed rapidly by a session where you can bring along the song that you want played at your funeral and to say why you want it. That's with Black Train Music. Then there's a talk from a guy who's studied near-death experiences, some weird and wonderful stories he's got. I highly recommend that one. I'll highly recommend all of them. There's another one. Chris Chase-Burton from Black Train Music is going to be guiding us through some songs that have been written for funerals through the ages. Then the local book club is going to be reading, or will have read, Big Fish. So join us for that conversation. That's on Sunday the 1st. Followed by a death cafe. Now, death cafes are open spaces to discuss death and our emotions and our response. Find out more on the site. On the evening of the 2nd, there's a conversation and a workshop on planning our own funeral so we don't get pushed around, do what we want. And then later in the week, we have another funeral director coming in to talk about what it's like directing funerals. What's with the big hats? Then we have an autumn walk on the 15th around the graveyard at Castle Bromwich, at St Mary and St Margaret's Church. Followed by someone from a hospice coming in. Hannah's coming from our local hospice to talk through their work and what they do. As the season draws to a close, you're invited to bring along any of your real life ghost stories, and we'll discuss what those experiences were. Saturday the 21st, there's a look at the development of the ideas of heaven and the afterlife from a biblical perspective. And then the last weekend, we have an art exhibition over a couple of days, the 29th and the 30th of October. And that is it. It looks good, doesn't it? Back to me. So there you have it. 2 months of exploring, of conversation, of open dialogue. We're not preaching anything. I know we're a church, but actually we're not preaching anything. We're saying, well, this is what we think. This is what other people think. And we're hopefully opening up the conversation about all the aspects that we can of death. So do come along. Do join in with some of the things. And in the meantime, have a nice rest of the day. Take care of yourselves, and hopefully we'll see you at some of the events coming up.